and good evening. You're watching World Today. It's Friday evening today, and World Today is your window to the world on DD India. On the show, we'll be keeping in a sharp focus on Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's three-day visit to India, plus which way are the US-China talks actually heading to, considering that Alaska talks remained acrimonious throughout. We will be getting you latest from Myanmar as well as it continues to explode. We'll also get you the latest on the global COVID numbers and much more on World Today. I'm Sakal Bhatt and here are the headlines. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin arrives on a three-day visit to India. Austin to hold talks with Defense Minister Rajnath Singh during the visit. US-China high-level in-person talks begin in Alaska. US tells China it does not see conflict but will stand up for principles and friends, warns China of respecting global order or facing more violent world. France announces a month-long limited lockdown in Paris in view of third wave of COVID-19. Meanwhile, Spain, Italy, France and Germany to resume use of AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. In Myanmar, crackdown triggers exodus with roads out of Yangon choked with people fleeing the junta's deadly crackdown. Lawmakers exploring if International Criminal Court can investigate any crimes against humanity committed since February 1st coup on anti-coup dissent. And in All England Open, Indian shuttlers PV Sindhu, Lakshya Sen and double pairing of Ashwini Ponnappa and Sikki Reddy register wins at the round of 16 stage in Birmingham. Sindhu to take on Japan's third seed Yamaguchi later today. And Champions League quarter-final draw announced. Title holders Bayern Munich to face PSG in the last 16. Manchester City to face Borussia Dortmund, while Real Madrid will face Liverpool. And let's begin World Today with big news. So, U.S. Secretary of Defense General Lloyd J Austin arrived in India today on a three-day visit. The visit comes at a time when geopolitics and geoeconomics are adapting to the post-COVID paradigm, and one in which the Indo-Pacific will play a very, very central role. Now, the visit follows within a week of the first Quad summit, which saw the leadership of India, Australia, Japan and U.S. take their cooperation to a new level, seeking a region that is free, open, inclusive and healthy, anchored by some democratic values and unconstrained by any sort of coercion. Now let's take a look at why is this visit important. During his visit, Secretary Austin is expected to meet Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh, our defense minister, and other dignitaries of the Indian government, and both sides are expected to discuss ways to further bolster bilateral cooperation, defense cooperation, exchange views on regional security, challenges and common interests in maintaining a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Discussions regarding defense cooperation would also focus on how both countries could consolidate military-to-military cooperation and defense, trade and industry cooperation. Secretary Austin's visit to India is part of his first overseas travel, which emphasizes to strengthen the India-US strategic partnership as well. And the first high-level US-China talks of the Biden administration also got off to a very fiery start on Thursday, with both sides leveling sharp rebukes of others' policies in a rare display that underscored the level of bilateral tension between the two countries. Now, the run-up to the meeting was marked by a flurry of moves by Washington that showed it was taking a tough stance or a tough position, and there was some blunt talking from Beijing as well.
The United States and China leveled sharp rebukes of each other's policies in the first high-level in-person talks of the Biden administration on Thursday, with deeply strained relations of the two global rivals on rare public display during the meeting's opening session in Alaska. The United States is looking for China to change its behavior if it wants to reset sour relations. But Beijing has said Washington is full of illusions if it thinks it will compromise. Sparring in an unusually extended back and forth in front of cameras, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan opened their meeting with China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi and State Councillor Wang Yi in Anchorage, fresh off of Blinken's visits to allies Japan and South Korea.
Today, we'll have an opportunity to discuss key priorities, both domestic and global, so that China can better understand our administration's intentions and approach. We'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, economic coercion toward our allies. Each of these actions threaten the rules-based order that maintains global stability. Our discussions here in Alaska, I suspect, will run the gamut. Our intent is to be direct about our concerns, direct about our priorities, with the goal of a more clear-eyed relationship between our countries moving forward.
Yang responded with a 15-minute speech in Chinese, lashing out about what he said was the United States' struggling democracy and poor treatment of minorities. Apparently taken aback by Yang's remarks, Blinken held journalists in the room so he could respond. Sullivan said the United States did not seek conflict with China but would stand up for principles and friends.
We do not seek conflict, but we welcome stiff competition, and we will always stand up for our principles, for our people, and for our friends.
What is typically a few minutes of opening remarks open to the press for such high-level meetings lasted for more than an hour, and the two delegations tussled about when the media would be ushered out of the room. The Chinese diplomats also ensured that the diplomatic talks literally became a no-holds-barred conversation. Yang said China firmly opposed U.S. interference in its internal affairs.
On cyber attacks, let me say that whether it's the ability to launch cyber attacks or the technologies that could be deployed, the United States is the champion in this regard.
Washington has said it is willing to work with China when it is in the interest of the United States and has cited the fight against climate change and the coronavirus pandemic as examples. Following the exchange, a senior U.S. administration official said China had immediately violated agreed-to protocol, which was 2 minutes of opening remarks by each of the principals. World Today Desk, DD India.
And Prasar Bharati correspondent Anshuman Mishra is joining us live from Beijing. An exclusive live input coming in from Anshuman there from Beijing on World Today. Anshuman, very quickly, now considering the kind of acrimonious beginning both had, which way it is really heading to? Because we've heard from China the first official response, which you obviously broke that part of important news break in the afternoon, early in the afternoon. How is US responding to it? What is the latest, first of all, that you're picking from both sides?
First rounds, and as we are gathering that there is another round of talks which has taken place today, and there is another round of talks which is expected to take place tonight. And if we see the activities and the acrimonious behavior in the opening talk, so that was nothing like out of bounds, and people were expecting this kind of behavior. And more so when the cameras were on and media was out there in the room. So both the sides, it seems, were working to send some kind of message to their domestic audiences as well. So experts now believe that in the main round of talks, there might be some sensible talks and issues might be discussed in a more sensible manner. As of now, China has put the onus on China. China has put the onus on United States, saying that the offer was from their side and China has offended. And it's not a good sign from the United States to treat their guests in such a manner. But definitely the kind of friction we have seen on different kind of issues, including Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, South China Sea, Senkaku Islands, and out of these many issues which China terms as their own internal affairs. So all these things are bound to appear during the talks, and real outcomes will be seen only after tonight's talks. Sakal.
But what's the sense that you are getting, Anshuman? You've been tracking it very closely. As of now, both sides don't intend to see eye to eye, you know, and they didn't really start on the conciliatory note. So when US says that we don't mind stiff competition, what does US really mean?
Sakal, actually, no one is expecting any sort of concrete outcomes from this talk, and both sides have already mentioned that it's just a sort of first meeting between them. It's not even the beginning of a series of talks. So you can get a sense from this. But yeah, looking at the US stand, it seems that US is ready to tackle, as they have also mentioned that US is ready to tackle the rise of China and the kind of activities China is carrying in, especially in Indo-Pacific region. And it also, I mean, all these things are also based on past 2 years, including the trade talks and trade tensions between both the countries, including the tensions based on technological grounds, including Huawei and all. So all these things are there. So definitely it's not going to be an easy way out for both the countries.
Yes, it's not going to be easy for both the countries. In fact, very glad to have former Ambassador Prabhu Dayal joining us on World Today. Ambassador Dayal, thank you so much for joining us. If you heard my colleague, he's reporting live from Beijing. First of all, what do you make of the undertone coming from both sides? And if, even for the optics, what is China and US wanting to prove a point here? Ambassador Dayal.
Well, as your correspondent mentioned, these were the first high-level talks between the two countries since President Joe Biden took office. Now, I feel that Beijing wants to reset ties after years of tension under the Trump administration. But Washington had said in advance before this meeting that this was a one-off and that future engagements would depend on China's deeds, not words. Now, I would like to point out that the Biden administration has been describing the relationship as a geopolitical competition between democracy and autocracy. It has said that it will be tough on issues of concern, but that it will be willing to work with Beijing on matters of interest. And as regards the Chinese, they have said that they will not compromise on what they say are matters of national security and sovereignty. Okay. So there is a lot that divides the two. But even in this sort of background, I think it was an unusual diplomatic sparring match that took place in Anchorage in Alaska. And it seems that the Biden team had been very blunt in public criticism before the meeting. So the Chinese knew what to expect, and they were prepared to hit back.
That's a very interesting point, sir. You know, unusual diplomatic sparring, that's the word you used. I want to get Anshuman here because he's there in Beijing, with your permission, Ambassador Dayal.
Yes, sure.
How unusual was it, Anshuman? If this was unusual, what is it that the both sides are trying to prove to their respective constituencies if they were not really ready to come on the same page and start this face-off on such a massive confrontation, because the world is watching both of them very closely?
Sakal, I think both the countries are trying to prove that they are standing their grounds, and they are approaching each other from the position of strength, which we have seen from their statements as well. And it was quite evident from the beginning when the allotted time of 4 minutes talk, they were stretched for around 1 hour. Obviously, that also took time for the translation and interpretation of Chinese. But definitely, both the sides, they wanted to prove their points from a position of strength. And like US is saying that we are going to tackle rise of China in a certain way, like they are putting it as a democracy versus autocracy. But China also is saying that if we see the statements of Yang Jiechi, that the US is not the only country who has the right to describe what democracy is. So China also is trying to counter those points. And all these things, obviously, they have come in a very different manner, acrimonious manner. And China also is trying to show to its people back home that, yes, we are not backing out and we are ready to tackle United States.
Yes, Ambassador Thayal, please come in here and please complete your points, sir.
Well, I would only like to add that while the sparring took place, this may have been a certain amount of posturing, because US sources said later that the private conversations which followed between the two sides were substantive and serious.
Okay.
So, in my view, whether or not they can find pragmatic points of cooperation will actually be the measure on how the relationship moves forward. There is a lot that China and the US disagree about. For instance, they disagree about trade. The US accuses China of unfair practices. And on its part, China wants the big trade tariffs introduced by the Trump administration to be eliminated. Again, the two sides disagree on matters relating to human rights and democracy. The US accuses China of genocide against the Uyghurs and also for trampling democratic rights in Hong Kong. China calls on the US to stop interfering in its internal affairs. So whether or not they can find pragmatic points of cooperation will be the measure on how the relationship will move forward. And I think this ongoing dialogue will indicate how hard the Biden administration is willing to push China on these entire range of issues.
So, Ambassador Thayal, this is purely for optics, would you say? But at the same time, look at at the juncture this is coming. You have China, US diplomatically sparring, and then you have United States Defense Secretary here in India for a 3-day visit. Very quickly.
Well, yes, of course, everything connects. The US wants to send a message across to China that it has friends and that it is working with its friends to contain China. China's expansionism is a cause of worry, not just to the United States, but also for a whole host of countries, including India. And if in this sort of an environment, India and the United States have a dialogue, it makes good sense. And I think the message is being sent in very clear terms to China.
And has this really worried China, Anshuman, though they may not like to admit, but yes, there's a lot happening around them. Anshuman?
Yes, Sakal. Actually, when the new US administration came into power in January, there were definite signs that the relation between US and China will improve, and the policies which were not liked by China during Trump administration, many things, including Huawei or trade tariffs, or for that matter, there is one more very acrimonious matter between US and China, is the arrest of CFO of Huawei. So all these things were, there was certain expectation that there might be some sort of move ahead, but definitely it did not take place. And with the United States moving towards Quad very seriously with the first Quad summit took place just a few days ago. So all these things are definitely a sign and matter of concern, which China is thinking seriously, Sakal.
Okay, Ambassador Thayal, you look at Quad, then you have United States interest in peaceful Indo-Pacific and further consolidating ties with India, and then you have the third aspect of China-US talking at Alaska. In the current scheme of things, geopolitically speaking, you have a COVID background. How significant are these developments from Indian perspective?
If you're referring to the US-China talks,
yes,
of course, India will watch these talks with a great deal of interest, because it should come as a surprise if the US suddenly wills under whatever pressure, because of the fact that the Biden administration has been very consistent in saying that the Chinese are indulging in some sort of grandstanding, and that it is prepared to go the whole hog when it comes to containing China's expansionism. In fact, a number of senior officials of the Biden administration have been saying in very categorical terms that the biggest threat to U.S. interests continues to be from China. And therefore, I think that we will be watching with interest what is going to be the outcome of these talks, whether there will be a continuation in terms of a second round remains to be seen. But as things stand, I think the Biden administration has been at pains to point out that these are a one-off series of talks, and that it doesn't mean that the talks would continue unless the Chinese show good behavior. In other words, if the Chinese change their behavior, to me it doesn't seem that that is going to happen so easily, because the Chinese are not going to alter their course in regard to the entire Indo-Pacific region,
Yes.
whether it comes to territorial expansionism, considering the entire South China Sea as their territorial sea,
Right.
or having the standoff with India, or whether it comes to their economic expansion.
Okay. In fact, that's a very interesting point, sir, you've raised. And in fact, since we have Anshuman also, live with us from Beijing. Anshuman, what do you have to say to that? Is this the part of the series? Is this for optics? What should we expect next?
Sakal, I think this was an attempt by both the countries to at least get in touch, get in contact. And we are ready to see what kind of impact it will have only after we see the outcome from this meeting when they talk tonight. But as of now, it seems it's only an attempt to get in touch, at least with the new administration.
Yes, on that note, thank you very much, Anshuman, for joining us from all the way from Beijing live, and also Ambassador Tayal. Really glad to have you with us again on World Today. Both of you gentlemen, thank you. And now let's move and talk about what is happening elsewhere in the world. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called for open talks with US President Joe Biden. Now, Russian President says he was ready to hold discussions with the US on bilateral relationship as well as other issues such as regional conflict. While talking to a TV channel, President Putin said he will order his foreign ministry to prepare the talks. Putin expressed interest to hold talks with the US a day after Biden said he thought the Russian leader was a killer, and already poor relations between Moscow and Washington sank to a new post-Cold War low. All right, so now let's talk about Myanmar. A committee of ousted civilian lawmakers in Myanmar is looking at whether it can ask the International Criminal Court to actually investigate any crimes against humanity committed following the 1st of Feb military coup. Myanmar has been in crisis since army ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi's government in a coup. Now, security forces have used increasingly violent tactics to suppress daily demonstrations, and thousands of people have been detained. Independent United Nations human rights investigator Thomas Andrews tells the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva last week that the Myanmar military had committed killings, torture and persecution that may constitute crimes against humanity. Myanmar, meanwhile, is not a member of the ICC.
Today it was the bloodiest day since the coup happened on the 1st of February. We had only today, 38 people died. We have now more than over 50 people died since the coup started, and many are...
So, hundreds of people have fled Myanmar's towns and cities since last month's military coup and are sheltering in areas that are controlled by ethnic militias on the Thai border. More than 24 ethnic armed groups are active in Myanmar's borderlands. According to reports, Thai authorities are bracing up for a surge of refugees and have set aside areas to shelter more than 43,000 people in Masot district. Thai border patrols have been increased. Let's shift our focus from Myanmar to Indonesia, where Indonesian President Joko Widodo today in a virtual address called for democracy to be restored and violence to be halted in Myanmar. Widodo also urged Southeast Asian leaders to hold a high-level meeting to discuss the prevailing situation in Myanmar. The Indonesian president stated that the safety of the people is top priority, calling for dialogue and reconciliation in the country. Widodo added that he would immediately call the Sultan of Brunei Darussalam as head of ASEAN as soon as possible to hold a high-level ASEAN meeting to discuss the crisis in Myanmar. Brunei is currently the chair of the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And now let's take a look at update on COVID-19 from across the world. Here are the numbers from across the world. The global COVID-19 case tally, which has crossed the 12 crore mark 3 days ago, now stands at over 12 crore 24 lakh. The tally recoveries stand over 9 crore 86. COVID-19 has also claimed over 27 lakh 3,000 lives worldwide. The US continues to remain worst affected from COVID-19, where more than 3 crore 3 lakh cases of COVID have been quoted or reported. The country's fatalities have crossed 5 lakh 52,000 mark. So these were the COVID numbers. Now let's shift our focus to France, where France has announced a month-long limited lockdown in Paris and several other regions in view of the third wave of COVID-19. France's Prime Minister on Thursday announced the decision of a month-long lockdown. Prime Minister Jean Castex says that the tougher restrictions followed a clear acceleration in the spread of coronavirus, with France now in the grip of the third wave. The lockdown will be imposed on 16 hardest hit departments, and it takes effect from midnight on Friday. Schools will stay open. People will be allowed to exercise outdoors within 10 kilometers radius of their homes. People living in these areas would not be allowed to travel to other parts of the France without any compelling reason. Meanwhile, Spain, Italy, France and Germany will resume use of AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. When France will resume vaccinating people against COVID-19 with the AstraZeneca vaccine, and French Prime Minister will receive the vaccine on Friday afternoon. Well, that's the news. French President said that the demonstrated efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine with regard to the prevention of hospitalizations and deaths linked to COVID largely won over the extremely low possibility of developing side effects. Spain will resume administering AstraZeneca's coronavirus vaccine from next Wednesday. Spain aims to vaccinate around 70% of its 47 million population by the end of the summer, has already given the first dose of AstraZeneca vaccine to almost 1 million people out of total of 7.68 million vaccines administered in Spain. And from Spain, let's move on to Germany, where Germany will also resume the use of AstraZeneca's coronavirus vaccine as of now on Friday. The president of Germany's authority in charge of vaccines says AstraZeneca vaccines would be labeled with a warning sign asking people to seek rapid medical advice if appropriate. Drug watchdogs in the EU and Britain have moved to shore up the confidence in AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine on Thursday after reports of blood clots prompted more than a dozen nations to suspend inoculations. The EU's drug watchdog says it is still convinced the benefits of the AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine outweighs the risks following an investigation into reports of blood clots that prompted more than a dozen nations to suspend its use. So, African nation also said on Thursday that African countries should continue to use AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine, echoing the WHO by saying that the shot's benefits outweighed risks. Meanwhile, India's vaccine matrix continues, keeping the Indo-Pacific region in focus. Made in India vaccines also have reached Solomon Islands. And further, the commercial supply of around 200,000 doses of Made in India vaccines handed over to Mauritius in a restricted ceremony today. Now let's talk about some buzz coming in from business world, financial world. American business and financial services company Moody's Analytics projected India's GDP to grow by 12% in 2021. In an earlier estimate last November, it had said that India's GDP will grow at 9% in the calendar year. And on the global front, Asian markets ended lower, tracking weak cues from the US markets as well. Let's also talk about Wall Street. Asian markets ended lower, and on Wall Street, it ended sharply lower, hit by rising treasury yields and fresh worries about the COVID-19 pandemic in Europe. And talking about stocks, let's also talk about European stocks. European stocks also fell today as inflation concerns continue to weigh on the markets. The pan-European stock 600 was 0.4% lower, while London's FTSE 100 dipped more than 0.6%. The CAC 40 in Paris was 0.7% below flat, while Frankfurt's DAX, that's DAX, fell 0.4%. And now let's move on, and here are some updates in our News at Glance segment. Take a look.
Samia Suluhu Hassan was sworn as Tanzania's first female president after the sudden death of John Magufuli from an illness. The 61-year-old, dressed in a black suit and red headscarf, took the oath of office in Dar es Salaam before inspecting troops at a military parade and receiving a cannon salute. Under the constitution, Hassan will serve the remainder of Magufuli's second 5-year term, which does not expire until 2025. She is the only other current serving female head of state in Africa, alongside Ethiopia's president Sahel Work Zewde, whose role is mainly ceremonial. Turkey's foreign minister met his Iranian counterpart in Istanbul. The meeting between Mevlut Cavusoglu and Javad Zarif at Dolmabahce office was also attended by Hakan Fidan, the head of Turkey's National Intelligence Organization. A Turkish foreign ministry statement said that bilateral relations between Turkey and Iran, as well as current regional and international issues, would be addressed during Zarif's visit. Severe storm in US's county Chilton in Alabama has caused extensive damage. The National Weather Service informed that at least 12 counties across central Alabama have been identified where potential tornadoes may have been tracked in. A system of severe thunderstorms spawned tornadoes in Alabama and Mississippi, leaving a trail of damage as it moved across parts of southern United States. In Peru, heavy rains have caused massive flood and destruction. Dramatic footage released by northern Peruvian department of Piura showed floods sweeping away houses. At least 15 homes and around 100 farmlands have been destroyed. More than 3,600 families in Piura department's remote mountainous area have been cut off after 5 bridges collapsed in the aftermath of heavy rains, although authorities have not reported any death. Wildfires continue to ravage across northeastern Mexico after suspension of firefighting operations due to bad weather. The fires have destroyed around 3,500 hectares of forest and grassland. 70 families have been evacuated and a dozen cabins have been destroyed in Arteaga Sierra between the northern states of Coahuila and Nuevo Leon. High temperatures and strong winds have stoked the flames and have made fire control efforts difficult. The bushfires that ravaged Australia between 2019-20 were so huge that they spewed as much smoke into the stratosphere as a large volcanic eruption with serious consequences for the environment. According to a study published in the journal Science, the amount of smoke released into the atmosphere by the fires is comparable to that put out by the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines in 1991, which was the second largest of the 20th century. Violence erupted in Paraguay's capital, Asunción, after Paraguayan opposition lawmakers lost a bid to impeach President Mario Abdo over the government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. A small group of protesters attacked the headquarters of the National Republican Association, that is the ruling party in the country. The protesters also set afire a part of the building, which was later brought under control by police with no major damage or injuries reported. Police dispersed stone-throwing protesters with rubber bullets and water cannons. NASA completed an 8-minute test of engines on a Boeing-built rocket for Artemis missions. The mission aims to return US astronauts to the moon by 2024, more than half a century since the last lunar walk. NASA conducted Thursday's hot fire test of the core stage of the Space Launch System rocket to stimulate a launch by firing the engines while anchored to a tower at its Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. The 4 RS-25 engines roared to life for the full duration of the test and filled surrounding area and sky with clouds of white smoke after the engines were cut off.
And it's time now for our Beyond Headlines segment, for your daily dose of offbeat, funny and odd news. You don't want to miss this one.
Letters written and typed by Britain's late Princess Diana went on sale on Thursday at an auction house in Cornwall, England. 40 letters penned by the princess to her friend Roger Bramble between 1990 and 97 make up part of the 36 lots on sale. Barbie creators released a new edition of the world's most famous doll in the likeness of Russia's only active female cosmonaut Anna Kikina. The new doll is part of a campaign by Mattel Company called You Can Be Whoever You Want. Country singer Dolly Parton is getting her own comic book. The 22-page Female Force Dolly Parton, which will be released on 31st March on print and digital formats, is the latest addition to Tidal Wave Comics' Female Force series, dedicated to inspirational women. Cancellation of public events during the COVID-19 lockdown has allowed German artist Antoinette an extended stay in the East German castle of Mersburg, where she has been working on her massive mural. Using only pencils, she has been creating intricate drawings on 5-meter-high panels. Locals can watch her work through the windows. A kangaroo made a fortunate escape after being swept away in floodwaters in Australia. The animal tried to cross a swollen creek before being caught by the flowing current. Taiwan is drilling wells, seeding clouds, and even appealing to the gods to help the subtropical island out of its worst drought in more than half a decade, after replenishing typhoons failed to make landfall last year. Water levels in some reservoirs have fallen to around 1/10 of their capacity. Indonesian eco-warrior Sadiman has successfully turned barren hills green after 24 years of effort and created water resources in a drought-prone mountainous area. Sadiman says he has big ambitions to plant trees, secure water resources and help people. Space and sea explorer and noted computer game developer Richard Garriott is the first person in the world to have explored the North and South Pole, flown to the International Space Station and descended to the deepest point on Earth, the Mariana Trench. Garriott said it took about 4 hours to descend about 7 miles to the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean. COVID-19 has done little to alter the ranking of the world's happiest countries, with Finland at the top for the 4th year running. The researchers behind the World's Happiness Report, now in its 9th year, used Gallup data asking people in 149 countries to rate their own happiness. Once again, the top spots were dominated by European countries, with Denmark coming second, followed by Switzerland, Iceland and the Netherlands. New Zealand, falling 1 place to 9th, was again the only non-European country in the top 10.
And let us now turn the pages of history, see what major events took place on this day, that is 19th of March in Today in History.
On this day in 1932, the Sydney Harbour Bridge was opened by the Premier of New South Wales. The Harbour Bridge was one of the greatest engineering masterpieces of its time. The bridge serves as the primary transportation link between Sydney and its suburbs on the northern side of the harbour. It spans about 500 meters, making it one of the longest steel arch bridges in the world. This day in the year 1945, Adolf Hitler issued his infamous Nero Decree, which called for the systematic destruction of Germany. The order was largely thwarted by Hitler's armaments minister Albert Speer and highlighted Hitler's waning authority as the Third Reich collapsed. On this day in 1962, Bob Dylan's self-titled 1962 debut was released. Dylan is one of the world's most influential music artists. His songs, Blowing in the Wind and The Times They Are Changing, became anthems for the anti-war movement. The album was produced by Colombia's legendary talent scout, John H. Hammond. This day in the year 1972, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, signed the Indo-Bangladesh Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation and Peace. The treaty was also known as the Indira-Mujib Treaty. On this day in 2003, the United States, along with coalition forces primarily from the United Kingdom, initiated war on Iraq. US President George W. Bush and his advisors built much of their case for war on the idea that Iraq under dictator Saddam Hussein possessed or was in the process of building weapons of mass destruction.
And let's get you some sports news. PV Sidhu put up an extremely dominant display on Thursday as she moved into the quarterfinals of All England Championship with a straight games win over Denmark's Line Kristoffersen. Sindhu demolished Dane 21-8, 21-8 in merely 25 minutes to win her second round match. Kristoffersen was absolutely no match for the Indian as Sindhu blazed through into the next round. Sindhu will now need all her expertise when she gets a tough test in the last 8 against Japan's Akane Yamaguchi. Yamaguchi got a walkover from her opponent on Thursday and will come fresh to the quarters. Earlier, Lakshya Sen also got a solid second round win over France's Thomas Roxel to advance to the quarterfinals. He beat French 21-18, 21-17 in 53 minutes. Lakshya will next be up against Marc Alejao from the Netherlands. And from badminton, let's talk about UEFA. The UEFA Champions League quarterfinals and semi-final draws are out. Defending champions Bayern Munich will take on Paris Saint-Germain in last year's UCL final replay. And another EPL club, Chelsea, will take on FC Porto, who stunned Cristiano Ronaldo's Juventus in the pre-quarters. And while English Premier League leaders Manchester City will take on German club Borussia Dortmund, and Real Madrid will face Liverpool. Staying with the soccer, Slavia Prague inflicted Rangers' first defeat at Ibrox in just over a year to knock the 9-man Scottish champions out of the Europa League. Now, Peter Olinska's first half header gave the Czech champions the lead following a 1-1 draw in Prague, and Nicole Stancu doubled the advantage after Leon Balogun was shown a second yellow. By then, Rangers were already down to 10, Kemar Roof having been sent off within 6 minutes of coming on for catching goalkeeper Ondrej Kola in the face with his boot. And Tottenham were knocked out of the Europa League as a sublime hat-trick from Mislav Orsic completed a remarkable second-leg turnaround for Dinamo Zagreb, leading 2-0 after a one-sided first encounter in London 7 days earlier. Spurs paid the price for a desperately poor performance against the Croatian champions. And World Athletics has reinstated the authorized neutral athlete scheme to allow up to 10 Russians to actually qualify for this year's Olympic Games if they meet certain criteria. The organization confirmed on Thursday. And for more details, here's a report.
World Athletics Russia Task Force Chairman Rune Anderson confirmed that a maximum of 10 athletes from the country would now be able to compete under a neutral flag ahead of the European summer season, if Russia's Athletics Federation continues to implement their plan to rebuild trust. Russia's Athletics Federation has been suspended since 2015 after a report commissioned by the World Anti-Doping Agency found evidence of mass doping among track and field athletes. Anderson revealed Russia's Athletics Federation has set certain key performance indicators in their bid to clean up the sports in the country, and a failure to implement these would likely see a blanket ban on athletes once more.
There is a process in place on what might happen if the KPIs the plan is not being adhered to as expected, the task force will then naturally discuss internally. We will give a recommendation to the council, and of course, it is about the nature of the breach of the KPIs that we have to look into. So this will be a process that we will work with RUSAF, the Reinstatement Commission, to resolve.
World Athletics President Sebastian Coe said he didn't see the need for Tokyo to make a decision on spectator numbers for the Olympics anytime soon, as reports indicated their intention to do so within a week. Coe added that he hoped fans could be allowed to see the games if health circumstances would allow for it. Anderson said late last year he had been given hope that Russia's Athletics Federation would work towards reinstatement to world athletics after the election of new federation president Pyotr Ivanov. Russia's Athletics Federation have been implementing the roadmap to reinstatement since 1st March. The process by which Russian athletes had in the past been cleared to compete internationally despite the federation's suspension was halted last March. There were 29 Russian athletes who took part under a neutral flag at the World Championships in Doha in 2019. Sports Desk, DD India.
And some news from table tennis. India's top 4 table tennis players, Achanta Sharad Kamal, Ganesakaran Satyan, Sutrita Mukherjee and Manika Batra have qualified for the Tokyo Olympics, the Asian Olympic qualification tournament in Doha on Thursday. While Satyan and Sutrita Mukherjee sealed their Olympic quota spots with group topping wins at the tournament, Sharad Kamal and Manika Batra's qualification is based on their higher ranking. They will be confirmed when the rankings are updated in April, and this will be Sharad's 4th Olympic appearance and the 2nd for Batra, while Satyan and Mukherjee qualified for their first ever games. Mukherjee, now India's 2nd highest ranked female player, beat India number 1 Batra 4-2 in a winner-takes-all clash. Now, despite her defeat, Batra made the cut as the highest ranked 2nd place player in the group. And well, there is just 1 week to go until the Tokyo Olympic torch relay gets underway, and is how you can follow every step of this historic 121-day journey around Japan, right from the grand start in Fukushima on 25th of March to the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in Tokyo on 23rd of July 2021.
The Olympic torch rally will officially get underway following a ceremony at National Training Center, J Village in Fukushima on 25th March. And over the following 121 days, the flame will visit all 47 prefectures in Japan. The rally will conclude on 23rd July when the flame will be used to light the Olympic quadrant during the opening ceremony of the Games, Tokyo 2020. On 12 March 2020, Tokyo Olympic flame was lit at the Temple of Hera at the sacred site of ancient Olympia in Greece. The flame was handed over to Japan during a ceremony at Panasonic Stadium, Matsushima Base in Miyagi to greet fanfare on 20 March last year. Following the postponement of the Games, the flame was kept alive at the Olympic Museum in Tokyo and has recently embarked on the tour of Itabe prefectures to mark the 10th year anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake. You can follow every step of the Olympic torch rally via dedicated live streaming, as well as enjoy the best highlights and images from across 121 days on the website, whether you live in Japan or anywhere in the world. The entire rally will also be broadcast live on the national television of the Japan, and you can get involved by following the official Tokyo 2020 social media handles and join in the conversation by using the hashtags. The Olympic torch rally will visit the most famous sightseeing spots throughout its 121-day journey in Japan, as well as some of the more unique places from across all 47 prefectures, starting in Fukushima and ending in the Tokyo. Sports Desk, DD India.
So BCCI has announced the ODI Squad on Friday morning that is all set to begin from 23rd of March in Pune, and with a new strategy in place for one-day international format, 3 new faces in the 18-member squad will be seen. Here is more.
With an inclusion of 3 new faces, Surya Kumar, Krunal Pandya and Prasidh Krishna, India announces an 18-member squad for 3-match one-day international series against England on Friday. India's left-arm Yorker sensation T. Natarajan, who was a standout player for India on the tour of Australia recently, has also made the cut for ODI squad. Natarajan has passed his fitness test and joined the team during the 4th T20 International against England in Ahmedabad. Debutant Surya Kumar has been included considering his magnificent half-century in the 4th T20 that India won by 8 wickets. And notably, this was also the first time Surya Kumar batted for India. The ODI squad includes Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, Shikhar Dhawan, Shubman Gill, Shreyas Iyer, Surya Kumar Yadav, Hardik Pandya, Rishabh Pant, KL Rahul, Yuzvendra Chahal, Kuldeep Yadav, Krunal Pandya, Washington Sundar, Natarajan, Bhuvneshwar Kumar, Mohammad Siraj, Prasidh Krishna and Shardul Thakur. On the other hand, all-rounder Ravindra Jadeja has still not recovered from his finger injury and will be missing the series. Pacer Mohammad Shami's name is also missing from the squad list as he also hadn't recovered from his wrist injury that he suffered on the Australian tour in December last year. Sports Desk, DD India.
And the Falcon and Winter Soldier brings together Anthony Mackie's Sam Wilson or Falcon and Sebastian Stan's Bucky Barnes or the Winter Soldier. The second Marvel Studio TV series to see the light of the day after WandaVision. It is created by Malcolm Spellman and directed by Kari Coughlin. But lawyers for Hollywood actor Johnny Depp said that his ex-wife's claims she had donated her divorce settlement to charity was a calculated lie. But the lawyers sought permission to appeal a London High Court ruling which upheld that he was a wife beater. A young woman on Thursday accused US actor Armie Hammer of raping her 4 years ago in Los Angeles, and the lawyer of the actor called the allegation outrageous. Take a look. And before we close, Hawaii-based US Air Force Band released a music video featuring a virtual collaboration with Giridhar Udupa, an acclaimed Indian percussionist artist who plays the ghatam, which is one of India's most ancient percussion instruments. And the collaboration was inspired by the band's Support Aero India 2021 and reinforces the US-India major defense partnership and people-to-people ties between the two countries. It is titled Open Clusters. The pandemic did not allow the US Air Force Band to be in India to perform live during Aero India, yet music connects all regardless of distance and boundaries. Have a look, and thank you very much for staying with us on World Today. From me and my entire team of World Today, we will be back on Monday. So be with us. Till then, namaskar.
India.